What's up guys, DCRC back here. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how I rebuild my Xray shocks. So first thing we're going to do is take off the shock cap so I can get the old oil out of here. So that one's loose. Right. So what I do is I cut open a water bottle or soda bottle and use that for my oil can for old oil. Right, and then I need to get another towel to the side and get as much oil as I can out of the caps and the shocks themselves, so try to get as much oil out of there. Alright, so then you'll need to get your oil, which I use the Hootie CST oil. And for my buggy shocks, I use 400 in the rear and 450 in the front. Pistons are 2-hole 1.6 in the front, 2-hole 1.7 in the rear, and Kyosho white springs all the way around. So I'm going to grab my oil. I'm going to make sure the shaft is all the way down, fill it up about a quarter of the way up, and then I'm going to slowly move my piston up and down about halfway up through the oil that's in the shock. And there will be some bubbles that come up. So once you pump it up and down slowly a few times, you're going to let it sit on your shock stand. And if you don't have a shock stand, you can actually grab a car stand and put some pliers. Say if these were pliers, you could set something on them and set these off of the car stand. You could put your shock just right there on the pliers. That's what I did before I had a shock stand. Then you take your other shock, fill this one up just a little bit. Do the same thing, pump it slowly up and down. Get the air out of underneath the piston. And if there's any little bubbles, that's fine, just let that sit there and they'll come up slowly. Go back to your other shock and pump that one again, see if, pump it a little bit faster, see if there's any bubbles trapped under there that didn't want to come up before. So this one seems good. I'm pumping it really fast, as you can see, and it's good. There's no bubbles at all in there. Seems good. So now, here, I'll get my light over so you can see better. No air in there. So now what we're going to do is set that aside. What I do is take the bleed screw out of the shock cap before I put the cap onto the shock. So the bleed screw is aside, and the cap is open. And then I'll put the rest of the oil in, and I'll cap it so there'll be a little bit extra oil on top. And there's a little bubble in there. So you can see it's kind of capped, like domed on there. And then I'll grab my shock cap, put it on. Sometimes it's hard to get them threaded right. There we go. Alright, so thread that on. And I'll actually tighten this tighten it all the way before I put the bleed screw in. So grab that, tighten it a bit. Then I'll get my bleed screw ready, and I'll hold the shock straight up and down and slowly push it against the table. See, oil will come out. When the piston is all the way at the top and the shaft is all the way pushed into the shock, then you will put the bleed screw on. Don't over tighten it since it's going into plastic, and it doesn't need to be tight at all. wipe some of the oil off, and you'll see there's still a little bit of compression, so I want to get that out. This is totally normal. I normally always bleed my shocks twice, so I just did it for the first time. So what I'll do is keep it all the way out so the piston is fully extended. Take the screw out, and then slowly push it against the table again. Some more oil will come out of there. This should be the last time I bleed it. Gonna just snug that down, don't over tighten it. Wipe off the extra oil. I pump it. And it's perfect. So the shock is dead, so 0 rebound. So not too much compression, that shock is perfect. So all you gotta do now is put the spring on, put the collar on, and go to your next shock. So do the same thing with this one. So we'll pump the piston up and down. There's a couple very small bubbles in that one. So I'm going to let these sit, and I'll come right back to you guys. Alright, so I just let that sit. I'm going to fill it up the rest of the way with oil, just like I did the last shock. Gonna cap it just a little bit. Put it back on the shock stand. And do the same thing with taking the bleed screw out of the cap. Put it on. There, that time was a lot easier to put on. Tighten it up. You never want to be wimpy tightening this cap, but you don't want to over tighten. I just stick a tool in it and just crank it about a quarter of a turn to, or not even a quarter of a turn, just so it's really snug. So there's no chance of it loosening when you're setting ride height or something like that. Do the same thing by pushing against the table, then put the screw in. Snug it up. Another reason why not to snug that screw too tight is the head could strip, and then you'd have to drill a little slot in it for a flathead screwdriver, which is not fun. So there's just a little bit of compression right there, so I'll bleed it one more time. A little bit more oil came out. Alright, so shock is dead just like the other one. So all I have to do is put the spring on. A little tip is for mounting the shocks, I always mount my shocks with the bleed screw going on the inside and this little washer. So this little ball that goes inside the cap, I put the washer on the outside, so the mount screw will go through and then the nut will go onto that washer. So I will mount them like this. So the bleed screw's on the inside so it doesn't get dirt on it, and then the washer goes on the nut side. So that you're good with that. Setup would be fronts 2-hole 1.6 pistons, 450 oil with white Kyosho springs. Rears 2-hole 1.7 hole with 400 CST and Kyosho whites as well. I think that translates to 32.5, 30. And then for 4-wheel drive, I use the same pistons, so 1.6 for 2-hole, 1.7 2-hole, and Kyosho red springs in the front and Kyosho white springs on the rear. But shock oil would be 600 front and 450 in the rear. So I hope this little video helped you guys build your Xray vehicles. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.